In this video, we're going to continue our discussion of animation. Now, we've already kind of talked about animation, the different types of animation, like paths and controllers and expressions. You know, we just kind of glossed over them.
Yep.
We've talked about time. We've talked about the fact that in Max, time is kind of represented as a discrete thing.
Sure, something broken up into segments.
Exactly. And now we're going to get into keyframe animation.
That's right.
Yes, very important stuff. And, hey, Zach, what is keyframe animation?
Well, if you want to get technical, keyframe animation is animation created by the interpolation of a computer between two recorded values at different times.
Wow.
Wow, doesn't that sound technical?
That's a mouthful.
Yeah, but it's really no big deal. When using keyframe animation, we are going to record parameter values at times along our timeline.
Sure.
And you guys have actually already seen this on one level or another.
Okay.
In between two or more recorded values, 3ds Max will interpolate the change over time through an animation curve, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and give us animation.
So basically, we set two important poses at two different points in time, and then Max kind of fills in the blanks, if you will.
That's right, and this actually dates back to 2D animation, back to hand-drawn animation, where a lead animator would come in having drawn all of the key poses for a character.
Like the important poses.
Exactly, like a walk cycle, maybe right where the feet impact the ground, then where one foot's up in the air, the other foot impacts, and so on and so forth. Then an in-between animator, a tweener, would come in, and he would draw all of the other frames to fill in the blanks, so that you didn't end up with a character on the ground, 1 foot up, 1 foot down. He'd make everything look smooth.
Sure.
In our case, 3ds Max is going to be our tweener. It's going to handle all of the interpolation from one recorded value to the next.
That's awesome. So it's like Max is working for us to help us get our animation done.
That's true. And since computer animation and keyframe animation have come around, animation has become so much faster and easier than it used to be back in the old days of stop motion, where you would literally have to take a model, you had to take a picture of it, change its pose just a little bit, and take another picture, change its pose just a little bit, take another picture, and so on and so forth, which you guys can see to this day in some of the older Star Wars movies.
Sure.
You know, things like that. But
before the special editions.
Well, even on the special editions, I mean, they've still got the AT-AT walkers marching across Hoth, and those are still
Zach is our resident Star Wars guru.
That's
Don't
true.
mess with him.
Anyways, so let's really break down keyframe animation, what makes it up, and how it works inside of 3ds Max.
Sure. Why don't we sketch out a quick example on our whiteboard, and then we could go ahead and build that in Max and show everyone.
Very cool. Let's do it. So here we have our magical whiteboard where somebody has already conveniently written out the term keyframe animation.
Yes, because it's important.
Yes.
And
so apparently it takes too long to write on camera.
Well, so why don't we talk about an example where we do something kind of simple right now. We're kind of starting with the basics.
Simple. And we've already talked about how animation can involve more parameters than just those based on motion.
Sure.
And you can animate things like radius. You can animate color. You can animate just a simple value that controls the weight of one attribute over another. I mean, it just goes on and on.
Pretty much any numerical parameter in Max can be animated.
That's right. Now, in this case, we're going to keep things very simple, down to things you can see, so we will be demonstrating the animation of motion, most specifically, translate X, just as an example.
Sure. And why don't we animate the motion of, say, a ball?
Sure, let's do it.
Moving across the X-axis. Pretty cool.
So let's break down what would happen in such a scene.
So I'm actually going to define, here is our X-axis right here.
Okay.
We're actually moving forward in X.
That's a really nice X-axis.
Thank you. I'm so good at drawing straight lines. Mm-hmm. And we're going to have our sphere moving kind of from one end to the other.
Okay.
And this could be thought of as minus 50 units in Max.
Okay.
And this could be thought of as 50 units in Max.
Okay.
And the ball is just kind of traversing. This is not going to be quite as straight. It's kind of traversing along from one end to the other.
I gotcha. Very cool.
And so how would we animate this? Well, basically...
we need to know things like over how much time will the animation take place.
Right.
Because, I mean, again, we talked in the last video about how important time is. You can have all of the motion of your animation already thought out in your head.
Yeah.
You know a character is going to run, jump off a cliff, snag a machine gun that was falling through the air, take out two robots just before it impacts the ground, throw a grenade, and then escape on a motorcycle.
Wow.
You know the motion that's going to take place.
Yeah.
What you don't know right off the top of your head is the timing.
Right, and that's why we alluded to using a stopwatch.
That's right. So
because take the guesswork out of it.
That's right. In this case, how much time is going to be involved in moving our ball from one end of, negative 50 to positive 50?
Let's say 1 second.
1 second, which, if we're using the NTSC standard, is going to be
30 frames.
30 frames.
Right, because we can multiply 1 second by 30 frames per second.
Okay.
And we get 30 frames.
1 times 30 is 30. I know that's higher math for some
Yes.
of you guys out there.
You see
I know
the
it's
second
rough.
cancels out with the 1 over second. You could just get frames. Yeah. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, this math lesson brought to you by Bill the
Yes.
Pill. Okay, so from here...
Don't want to scare you guys with math, but math is fun.
somebody in the back room just raised their hand and said, I was told there would be no math. Well, you're wrong. But anyways, so from here, we know what our animation needs to be. Now, let's just pretend we're in 3ds Max. We really will go forth and do this in Max here in just a few seconds. And yes, he wrote 30 frames right in the middle up there.
Yes.
So let's talk about recording that first keyframe. So
Right.
we would start off by recording a keyframe. Now, what is a keyframe? It is basically it is the recording of a specific value at a given time.
Translate X.
So let's start off let's just say we're at frame 0. So
Right.
go ahead and create a keyframe.
So we're at frame 0,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm actually creating my keyframe. Look at me go.
So this box is going to be representative of a
Right.
keyframe.
So we're at frame 0,
Mm-hmm.
and our translate X value here is minus 50.
That's really important what Bill just jotted down right there. He drew a box that represents a keyframe.
Right.
Inside this keyframe, we have 2 bits of information. We have the frame at which the animation is taking place, or the frame at which the keyframe exists, I suppose you could say.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have the translate X, or the attribute that is being animated.
Right.
This really is the information that keyframes are going to hold.
Yep.
They're going to hold a time and a given value.
Right. So why don't we go ahead and set another key? So basically we would take our ball, we would move our ball across the x-axis to translate x equals 50, and then we would set another key.
Absolutely.
Very simple. So now
Now, the key there, and it was just kind of subtly mentioned, we would move our timeline first.
absolutely.
And then we would
Yep.
relocate the ball and set a new key.
Right.
That is something I just kind of want to plant that seed. Make sure you guys are aware of that. You will adjust the timeline first.
Right.
The timeline first.
That
Everybody
is
hear me say
very
that?
important.
Okay, good. As
Yes.
long as everybody wrote that down.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so this new frame will be 30.
Or 29, but we'll say 30 in this case.
Let's just keep it simple. We'll
Yeah.
0 to 30. So we don't have to do too much higher math.
And our
And
TX.
translate X will now be positive 50. So we've moved what we will call 100 units. We all know it's probably 101, but that's okay.
Sure.
We've moved about 100 units forward over about 30 frames.
Right.
And if you think about that, you have just defined animation. Don't even worry about the computer, just think about it.
Yeah.
I mean, if you say to somebody, I am going to go from this point in space to that point in space over 30 seconds, you're moving. You have just moved. And so we've actually done the exact same thing inside the computer. We've actually established a location at this time, a new location at this time. Internally, Max now knows there will be motion, and it will interpolate the resultant motion
Right.
from those 2 recordings.
It's going to kind of fill in the blanks from frames 1 to 29.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, let's go ahead just real quick and jump over to 3ds Max and
Okay.
just demonstrate this.
Go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go ahead and create my trusty sphere.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to start at this end of the... let me go ahead and maximize this. Easier to see.
I like
Yeah.
maximizing.
So now we can see that the x direction is getting positive as you go to the right.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to start with our sphere over here. And
Start with the sphere over here.
uh-huh. And so this is going to be our initial key at frame 0.
Okay, now what's our current location in X?
Our current location in X would be, let me hit W to bring out the move tool. We could actually see down here, it's negative 69.
Let's go ahead and set it to negative 50.
Sure
just
thing.
for our example.
Absolutely.
Dun, dun, dun.
So we're at negative 50 right now.
All right, nice.
Yeah. So now I'm going to turn on set key mode in Max.
Okay.
And I'm going to, should I set my key? Think that's a good idea?
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that.
Okay.
Now, we're going to talk more about the methods of actual key framing, creating these keys, in just a few minutes.
Sure. We just want to give it a quick example. This is how keyframe animation works.
That's right. So
Yeah.
for now, just kind of roll with us. This is one of the ways we can set keys, and we'll move on from there.
And you can see that the key is now set at time equals 0.
Mhm. We actually have that little box, very much like what we drew over in the whiteboard.
Yeah, so now I'm going to go ahead and move my time slider over to frame equals 30.
In fact, go ahead and take a second before you set your next key. Let's
Sure.
go over into our time configuration for just a moment.
Okay.
And let's just set our whole timeline down to 30 frames.
Oh, sure, let's set our range.
So start time is 0, end time will be 30, yay, and we'll just click OK, and there we go. So
Yeah.
now our whole timeline is equal to what we created over on the whiteboard.
Very cool. So now we've moved our time over to 30,
Mhm.
and now we're going to move the x translate value of our sphere to positive 50.
So go ahead, yeah, drag it, and then we'll just kind of adjust it.
And I will keep adjusting because
that would be positive 100.
Exactly. So we're at 57. I'll go ahead and key in
back
50.
To 50.
Yeah.
And now go ahead and record your second location at this new time, and watch over here at the number 30 on the time slider. If you just move your mouse in that, there you go. Go ahead and click key, and boom, we have a new key that has been recorded.
We have animation.
We have animation.
Woohoo.
Now here's the thing. All we did is we told Max, I want you to be here at this time and here at that time. And yet we don't have a snap. We don't have the ball disappearing one moment and reappearing over here.
Right.
Why not? It's because of interpolation. Now let's talk a little bit about interpolation. Let me jump back over to the whiteboard. Now, inside 3ds Max, a graph is created.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what Bill's going to do real quick is draw out kind of a simulation of this graph that you'll see inside 3ds Max. Now, you guys may have been in an algebra class at one point in your lives. It may not have been your proudest moment, but bear with us.
I loved algebra.
That's right. On this graph, the bottom area is going to represent time.
Right.
The side area that moves up and down along the graph is going to represent an attribute or parameter's value. In this case, of course, translate x.
Translate x.
Now, our keyframes are going to be graphed along. So now, let's see, along the left side of our graph, let's go ahead and designate some values. So let's say the bottom of the graph is about -50. So, like somewhere here along the side of the graph, we'll kind of let everybody know.
Yeah, we'll just label this -50.
Yeah. We'll put in our numeric range, so to speak, so that everybody kind of knows what we're looking at. And then up at the top will be +50, and Bill will just kind of try to fit it in there.
Excuse my mad penmanship skills,
no
but this
problem.
is +50.
And then right about the center of that grid will be like 0. So
sure thing.
Right on the left-hand side, right up in the middle will be kind of like a 0 line. So you can see that we're crossing 0 on the way over. Now down on the bottom of the graph, if we were to label this, the far left-hand side would be frame 0.
Right, or time equals 0.
Time equals 0. Mm-hmm. And the end of it would be 30.
Right. Fitting it in again.
Yeah, he'll just, again, try to fit everything in. Now, let's actually consider graphing all of this stuff out the way 3ds Max does. It's going to start off just by creating points for our keyframes.
Right.
Now, that first keyframe designates frame
you can
0.
See right here. Yep.
First
frame
keyframe,
0.
0 with a value of -50.
Yeah.
So we'll create that first point, which he'll draw nice and dark for us. And then that second point is going to be at a value of 30 in time and a value of 50 for our parameter. So it'd be way up here. And you could actually draw little dashed lines out to that to kind of show where it would line up.
Sure.
And yeah, you're going to have to punch the pen down a little bit harder for
Yeah, it's a little bit faint, probably.
Pressure sensitivity is
Make a second
awesome.
pass here.
Oh,
it's makeshift graph
0.
paper.
Yeah. Gotcha. Okay, so there are 2 points. Now, to create the resulting animation in between these 2 points, a curve must be drawn or created. Mm-hmm. And 3ds Max is actually going to create that for us. Go ahead and draw a real nice dark curve that'll connect these 2 guys up. And you just pretend that that's a nice straight curve. And actually, the cool thing is in 3ds Max, by default, it's not going to be a straight curve anyway.
No, it's not.
Which is something we'll talk about a little bit later. Just remember that I said it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the cool thing is if you follow this curve along any given time, like let's say we go back to about frame 15, which would be about the middle of our graph along the timeline, and we draw a little line up. Go ahead and make your lines a little bit darker. Just make sure everybody can see them at home. There you go. So we draw up to here, and then you draw a point right there on that graph, and then you draw straight back. You'll notice it's right about 0. So halfway along our timeline, we're about halfway in between the animation, which at this point puts us at 0.
Right. Position X would be 0 at that point.
You can make calculations like this anywhere along the timeline because of this curve. So this curve is, in effect, defining the course of our animation.
Very cool.
Now let's take just a second, and let's go back over to 3ds Max.
Going back to Max.
And let's open up the curve editor. Dun, 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 dun.
Let's slide my main toolbar to the left.
Okay, which we only have to do because we have such a low resolution, but that's okay.
I'm actually going to turn off set key because we're done setting keys for now.
Okay. And it's thinking. So
there it is. Max is calculating.
So if we go ahead and open this up, we actually have the exact same representation that I mentioned a second ago, where we have time across the bottom of the graph.
That's right.
We have parameter value.
0 to 30.
We have parameter value running along the left side of the graph.
Yep.
We have our two keys recorded. They're two little tiny black dots on the graph. One is selected now, and then there's the other one on the far end.
2 key.
And 3ds Max has drawn this red curve that connects the two.
Right.
Now, in this case, it's not a straight line. We'll talk more about the shape of curves and how it affects animation later on in a
something
future
like
video.
a default curve behavior, if you will.
That's right, yeah. We'll talk about all that a little bit later. All you need to know right now is that Max has created this curve, and this curve is going to define the nature of the motion we get just by recording 2 keyframes.
Right. It is interpolated the rest.
That's right. That is, in fact, you can call that an interpolation curve. I've also heard them called animation curves, function curves.
Function curves,
I mean, they just a lot of different names for them. The bottom line is it is a curve that defines your motion.
Right, and according to this curve, as we can see here, that at time equals 15, you could go up here, just like we drew out, and go back, and you should be at x position 0.
That's right.
Now let's see if it's telling the truth. I'm going to prove that one.
Drag right over here to frame 15, and there
we're exactly
you are
at 0. X equals 0, right down here.
So yeah, you can slide right along that curve, and you can get the location of your object along a given axis at any point along your animation.
Very cool.
Now, notice we're not getting into the curve editor's user interface right now. We're not talking about this big list of things you see on the left-hand side of the screen. We're not talking about all these buttons and knobs and switches and input fields. And
yeah, we just wanted to give you an initial overview of here's a curve, here's where to get it, here's what it looks like.
That's right. We want to show you that 3ds Max is really doing the things that we are drawing out on our whiteboard. But now let's jump back over to the whiteboard for a minute.
Sure thing. Let me close my curve editor real quick. Go to our whiteboard.
And go ahead and section us off an area right over here. We're going to talk about the different ways in which you can set keyframes.
Okay.
Oh, look at this. He's got magic shift key action.
Shh, that was supposed to be done by hand.
Oh, yeah.
Because you could tell. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
Like
we actually already got to see one of your quote-unquote hand-drawn straight lines. So.
Yeah, my cover's
So let's draw a quick, like you can actually write out how to set keyframes.
Yep.
Write quickly. Don't waste these people's time.
Dun, dun, dun.
How to set keyframes. And there's actually several ways that you can set keyframes inside of 3ds Max. We're going to be talking about those. The two main ways are going to be auto and set key, but we'll actually handle those separately. So go ahead and put down number 1, and let's talk about set key, which you guys actually just saw a second ago.
Yep.
Let's jump back over to 3ds Max for just a moment.
Sure thing.
Now tell us a little bit about how set key is going to work.
Well, basically, you kind of have to tell Max that you want to be laying down keys. Mm-hmm. So you hit the set key button to kind of enable set key mode.
Right. In a sense, clicking on set key switches on animatability.
Right.
I mean, because as long as this is off, you are not going to inadvertently create keyframes under any reason, which is very handy because there are times when you want to model, you want to texture, you want to move objects around in your scene, and you don't necessarily want to accidentally animate them while you're doing it.
Sure. So with set key off, that's when you want to sort of set up your initial position, if you will.
That's right.
Then when you're ready to animate, you could turn on set key, and then you could tell it's on because you get this nice red border on your screen.
That's right. Now, set key animation can be defined in a way as user-driven animation.
Right.
Because you are the one that has to actually create these recordings of values at times, or keyframes.
Right.
Now, earlier, you actually saw Bill do this. He moved an object to one side of the grid, in this case, -50, and he clicked a button. What button did you click?
I clicked the key button.
Yeah, now why did you do that?
Because that's where you're telling Max, I explicitly want to set a key at this point in time.
That's right. That says take the selected object, or because we've told it selected object, which I'll get into in just a minute.
Yeah.
We've taken the selected object, we've positioned it where we want it. I want you to record its current position at this time.
Right.
So that's the cool thing. It's not like you have to actually go in there and punch in numbers, like say, at frame 50, type enter. I need this to be at frame... or I need this to be at a location of -50. You don't have to do all of that. Mm-hmm. All you have to do is position your object, move your time slider to where you want it to be, and key.
Yep,
then you move your time slider, move your object, key. Move your time slider, move your object, key, and so forth. Now, how did 3ds Max know what was to be keyed?
Well, that is a very good question.
Yeah.
But we kind of have the ability to define what attributes we want Max to listen to when we're setting keys.
I did notice that over here, when we click the key button here on our timeline, you'll notice we get this little box that has 3 colors in it.
Right.
Red, green, and blue. And we already mentioned this in a previous video. Red is going to be for translation, green is going to be for rotation, and blue is going to be for scale. And that means we have keyframed translation, rotation, and scaling on this object.
All at the same time.
Right. Now, why is that? How can we control that? Because all we animated was motion.
Well, we have the ability to filter out things that we don't want to record when setting keys.
Excellent. How can we do that?
We can do that by opening up our key filters button right here. And now we can see the things that are going to get keyed and the things that are not going to get keyed. This is pretty interesting. We have check marks by rotation, position, rotation, scale, and something else here, IK parameters.
Which, we'll be talking more about IK parameters a little bit later once we get into character rigging. There are other parameters in here we could key. We can key all parameters on the object, which I very rarely, if ever, recommend that you do.
Right.
Of course, we can explicitly tell it to listen to position, rotation, or scale. We have object parameters, meaning things like, radius and whatnot. We have custom attributes if we've created any, which is, again, something we'll talk about a little bit later. Any modifiers that we may have added to the object. Any material. So if we do want to keyframe the color of an object.
That is kind of cool.
Or any other parameters that aren't necessarily represented here by anything in this list.
Right. And so basically, when you have a check mark, that means Max is listening and it's going to record that value. And if there's no check mark, it's going to ignore it.
Cool. So here's what I want you to do. Go ahead and switch off everything but position. Let's say we only want to listen to position.
Gotcha.
And let's go ahead and close that window. Now kill off your existing animation. I don't care how you do it.
Okay. I'm going to turn off set key and rewind, just a little habit that I get into. I'm going to kill this key by highlighting it, hitting the delete key.
He drew a marquee selection box around it.
Yeah, so it turns white. You know it's selected. Then I'm going to hit Control and marquee select my other key.
Ooh.
Now they're both selected. I'm going to hit delete on my keyboard.
Okay.
And they're gone.
Cool.
No more animation.
Excellent. So you managed to destroy the keyframes that you've created, basically erase those recordings of value at a given time. Now, using the same technique we used a second ago for set key, why don't you go ahead and reanimate your ball?
Sounds good.
But now that we've adjusted our filters, you're going to notice a few different things.
Okay, let's do it. So we're starting here, -50 in X at frame 0. Hit key.
Right. So we've explicitly made that recording.
Yep.
Notice our keyframe immediately. In fact, go ahead and slide the time slider and take a look at the color of that keyframe. Now, instead of being red, green, and blue, it's
solid red.
Just red. That means all we have keyed is position, just our translation.
Right. We've filtered out those other attributes that we don't want Max to listen to.
That's right.
Now.
And just in case there's any confusion, because throughout Max, position, they only refer to it as position in a lot of different environments, different 3D applications, even in various places throughout Max. Motion, like a position, is also referred to as translation.
Sure.
So if you hear me say that, I'm referring to position.
Right.
Translation equals position.
They're synonymous. So I'm going to go ahead and now drag in positive X 100 units, looking down on my coordinate display, to about 100 units. Which should put me at around 50.
Right.
I'll go ahead and even that out.
Punch in a flat 50.
Yeah. I'm going to go ahead now. I've already moved my time slider, so I'm at frame 30, position 50. I'm going to hit key. I'm done keying. I'll turn off set key.
Excellent. So if you go ahead and move the time slider now, you have the exact same animation you did before, except now all we have keyframed, all we've recorded, is the position of the object.
Right.
Now this is a topic that I'll be getting into a little more in detail once we start talking about working with animation curves. But what we've just done is created a much more efficient animation.
Right, because Max doesn't have to remember these different attributes that we don't really care about.
That's right. Every time you place a keyframe, Max must calculate it.
Right.
So if you, like in this case, we have only recorded position, where earlier we recorded position, rotation, and scale. Now ask yourself, did rotation or scale change at all over time?
Nope.
The answer is no. But we still keyframed them. So basically we've told Max to calculate no change.
Right.
In essence, it's like telling Max, I want you to sit still, but I want you to think about sitting still while you're doing it. It's wasting time. It's wasting valuable computer resources. But again, that's something I'll be talking about a little bit later. I just want you to kind of have the idea of it in your mind.
Sure.
Now, we also have the ability to control whether or not we're keying selected objects, over here inside of our drop-down. And right now, in this case, it's just going to be just whatever we have selected.
Right.
This will change based on different selections you have in your viewport. I did just kind of want to point that out.
Sure thing.
And another thing that we have over here, which we'll be talking about a little more in depth once we talk about function curves, is controlling the default tangency. Now, in case anybody was still curious about that, we'll be talking about that just a little bit later, okay?
Yeah. And this is kind of a new feature in Max 8, which is kind of cool.
Right, it is, which I'm so glad that it's there, finally. And
you guys will appreciate that, too.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's see. That is method number 1 for dropping in keyframes.
Yep.
Now, hang on. Before you leave Max.
Sure thing.
I wasn't ready to run away just yet.
Go back to Max.
That's right. There is a hotkey for clicking on your little key button down there.
That's right. That is K.
That's right. So once set key is activated, you can just hit the K key. In fact, go ahead and hit set key. Let's take us up to about frame 15. Drag the ball up into the air and hit K.
Hitting K.
Chomp. Now let's go ahead and drag the time slider. And we've actually done something very interesting here. If you're totally new to animation, we started off by creating 2 anchor points.
That's right.
We told the ball where we want it to be at the beginning of the animation and at the end of the animation.
Mm-hmm.
And then right in the middle, we slide back and we say, but while you're in between these 2 keyframes, I want you to be up in the air.
Anchor points are very important.
So as our recording method went, we said, here, you're going to be on the ground. Here, you're going to be on the ground. But after we come into the middle and drag the thing up into the air, we start to get motion that'll pick us up and pull us back down.
Very cool.
All right, so that's going to cover method number 1 for creating keyframes.
Sure.
Let's go ahead and jump back to our whiteboard for just a minute. And let's talk about our second key method, which is going to be, dun dun dun, auto key.
Auto key, very important.
You were going to answer if I was going to.
Like,
Big number 2
way.
and
yes.
The auto key. Now, auto key is an extremely important animation feature inside of 3ds Max. In fact, as mentioned earlier, many of the tools that you will use often in 3ds Max will only listen to auto key and will not respond to the set key functionality.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very important that you do get to know auto key. A lot of people animating in 3ds Max prefer auto key because what this does is this will, as the name suggests, automatically place keyframes for you.
Cool.
Now, set key was user dependent. That's where you physically go in and push a button that explicitly says to Max, record a keyframe, I command you.
Right. You're laying down those keys on your own.
That's right.
Yeah.
Auto key is going to be a little different, where what you're going to do is you're going to move the time slider.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to change a value.
Right.
And any time 3ds Max detects that you have changed a value at a different time, it will place a keyframe.
Very handy.
So it's very handy, but it's also a little on the dangerous side.
Right.
Because if you leave it on and you start moving objects around your scene without paying attention to it, you will be inadvertently animating your whole scene in a really messy kind of way.
Unwanted animation, which may look funny, but won't really be what you want.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and go back to 3ds Max.
Back to Max.
Let's switch off set key. Let's delete out all of our keyframes.
Holding Control to marquee select and add to my selection. Hit the delete key.
Hang on, before you hit delete.
Sure.
I did notice that you rewound before you deleted out your keys.
Yes.
Now, why did you do that?
I did that because I kind of want to preserve this initial position of the ball at negative 50.
Exactly. Now, let's give a quick demonstration. Let's go ahead and move up to about frame 10. Just an example.
Okay, the ball's kind of in the air.
Yeah, now delete out all of your keyframes while we're sitting here at frame 10.
They're still selected. I'm going to hit delete.
Boom. Actually, it looks like you might have inadvertently deleted the ball, too. So.
I'll select those keys again.
Just to be safe.
It was like, let's kill that ball.
Nice work.
There you go.
So now if you rewind, look at this.
Huh.
Well, this is our ball's new position.
Yeah.
Essentially, we ripped all of the animation out from under this ball while it was still floating in the air.
Right.
So if you want to preserve that initial position of your object, make sure you rewind back to the beginning of your animation before you delete your keyframes. Go
Very
ahead
important.
And undo that.
Now undo.
Now rewind.
Or times 0.
Yeah.
And now I will select my keys so I don't
at the very least,
make
sure your focus is down on your timeline.
Right.
And there you go.
Cool.
So now everything is good to go. Now let's go ahead and employ auto key to create our animation.
Okay, sounds great. So turn on auto key.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have the ball initially where we like it at frame 0.
Mm-hmm.
That's very important. We're just going to move our time slider to the frame that we want to, set our key at, which will be at frame 30. So I'm actually just going to hit.
So you don't have to do anything else? Wow. See, I come from a background from other 3D applications.
Sure.
Some of you guys might as well. And a lot of these other 3D apps, you have to place the initial key for AutoKey yourself.
Right, and Max will do that for you, but it will do that at frame 0.
That's right. Now, the only reason I'm mentioning that, I realize some of you guys might be complete noobs to 3D, therefore I don't expect you to understand what I'm saying. Some others amongst you might be converting to Max from another 3D application and just trying to pick up some new skills. So I do want to mention that inside of 3ds Max, when using AutoKey, you do not need to create your own first keyframe.
That's right.
3ds Max is going to do that at frame 0 automatically, and you can actually see that right now. You see it automatically flash up as soon as he moved the object, which means as soon as 3ds Max detected a change in value at a given time, booyah, it set keys for you.
I'm actually just going to start dragging right now.
Watch the timeline, boom. It just appears immediately.
Yep.
Now here's the thing. You drag to an imprecise location, in this case 58.859, and if you drag the time slider right now, you're going to notice that we are moving from negative 50 to this new value of 58.859.
Right.
But that seems like a problem. That's an error. We wanted it to go from negative 50 to positive 50.
Exactly.
So, how do we change it now?
Well, because AutoKey is still turned on and we're still at frame 30, we can basically position this wherever we want, and Max will remember that as the second key in the animation.
That's right. Every time we change that attribute's value, Max is going to record it at the given frame.
That's right.
Well, the cool thing about this is, just as a quick example, we could, of course, come in here and make this nice and precise. We could set this down to 50, and now you'll notice we are going from negative 50, visible here, to positive 50, and that's great. But we can also come all the way back to 0 and give this any new position we like, and that will become the start position.
Very cool.
We can come over here and give this a new end position. Notice we have new areas in here, new animation.
We have just those two keys set, and Max is interpolating between them, just like before.
And now we can come in the middle, and notice I'm not clicking anything at all. I'm just moving to a new space in time, and I'm moving our object. Boom. And we have a new animation now. Wah, wah.
Very cool. So with AutoKey, move time slider, then position your object or set your parameter. That's all you have to do.
Now, on the other hand, this does get a little dangerous, and here's why. Let me go ahead and undo. Actually, I think I undid a little bit far, so let me go ahead. I'll just delete out our animation as it exists.
Sure.
Boom, and we'll just kill that out just to be safe. I'll slide up here like so. We'll bring this guy up here somewhere right about 50, and I'll just punch in the exact value. Again, Max will clean up that animation for me.
Yep.
So there's our original animation again.
Right.
Here's the problem. Let's say this is exactly the animation we want. If we forget and leave AutoKey on, and then we're like, I kind of wanted that ball to be up a little higher in the air, or maybe you just need to get it out of your way.
Yeah.
You're going to model something here at the origin, and you need the ball to temporarily get out of your way for a moment. You move it, you're like, okay, now let's go back, and later on in the day, you hit play.
You're like, what's going on?
You just totally messed up your animation.
Right.
And why? Because AutoKey was on, and Max detected a change in value at a new time.
Right.
So it automatically placed a key for you.
Yep. So always remember to turn off AutoKey when you want Max to stop remembering what you're doing.
That's right. Now let me go ahead. I'm going to delete this out. Now, of course, it should go without saying, but I want to make sure all bases are covered. We can, let me undo that. Let me come over here to frame 15 or so. We'll move this up into the air and see there's the very similar animation of what we created with Set Key.
Sure.
Of course, you don't have to worry about things like key filters when you're doing AutoKey. I do want to make sure this is clear because this part doesn't exactly go without saying.
Sure.
This actually confuses some people. Our key filters are currently set to position, rotation, and scale. These are the set key filters.
Right.
These have nothing to do with AutoKey, meaning that if I were to come in here right now and grab the scale tool and scale this down like so, notice we get some new keyframes. We have blue and blue, meaning that we have a key for scale. Then we scale down, and then we could come maybe over here to frame 24, and we could scale back up.
Oh, crazy.
Get like some really weird scale, and now...
And that filter was actually turned off for scale, yet Max still keyed it anyway because those filters are only for set key.
That's right. You'll notice that the scale is off. In fact, we can go even a bit further. We could grab, say, like the radius in this case, and we could go maybe come over here to frame 28 and drag this down. Notice that the spinner gets a little red border around it to indicate that it's been animated. We also get a gray keyframe here at frame 0.
Right.
Also notice, this is just something to keep in mind, that this gray keyframe has covered up all other keyframes.
Sure.
You no longer see red, green, and blue. They've actually been covered up by a gray keyframe. But now we're also animating the radius over time. You can actually see the value change as I move the time slider.
That's right.
The point is that those key filters only work for set key. Auto key is going to listen to whatever attributes you change.
Right.
Which is why it gets so dangerous.
Exactly.
If you forget that it's on and you start changing a whole bunch of parameters, you are inadvertently animating all those parameters. So as soon as you are finished animating, make sure you switch this off. That way you can make any changes you want. In fact, if I undo just a few times, we get rid of those scale keys and the keys for the radius.
Sure.
If I switch off auto key, I can now come in here and I can change the radius to whatever I want, and it's not being animated.
Right.
I mean, I can go back and, I wanted the ball to be maybe a little bit bigger. I can change that with auto key off, and it's just changing the parameter. It's not animating the parameter.
Exactly.
Now, they have tried to make this nice and convenient for you so that when you have either auto key or set key on, you get big red bars on your interface. If, you're showing your view, so to speak, your active viewport will suddenly become red instead of yellow.
Yep. Autodesk has gone out of their way to let you know that you're in animation mode.
That's right. They want you to know, hey, you're animating. Don't do anything you don't want to animate.
Yep.
So there you go. And really, I think with that, we've covered everything that I wanted to talk about.
I think
that
we
is, the nature of keyframe animation, the fact that keyframe animation is the result of recording values at two different times, that you have an interpolation in between those values, which is in the form of a curve. We're going to be talking more about curves a little bit later, that you can use set key, along with a certain set of filters in 3ds Max to key various attributes, and you can use auto key to key anything that you change.
Right, anything.
So that will wrap things up for this video, guys. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone.